Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And what's up? Welcome in GC Live, Wes Mitchell, Chris Clark, Monday episode of the show. Of course, diving into South Carolina versus Florida and what happened. That's the big question. What happened as the Gamecocks fall by 2 points to Florida after having a 10-point lead into the fourth quarter of this game? We're going to talk about that and more. Of course, we'll dive into the commitment of Jalewis Solomon. Maybe get into a little other recruiting talk as well. But first, this show is brought to you by our buddy Clint Hammond of Movement Mortgage, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. If you're buying a home in the state of South Carolina and you want somebody to get you the absolute best interest rate you can get, if you want them to kind of talk you through what various products are out there, certainly if you're a first-time home buyer, you're going to want somebody like Clint who has a great deal of experience and can help walk you through this process. He did the same for me. He can do the same for you. Call him today. More information, clint.hammond.com, 803-771-6933. Chris, we got to talk about it, man. The title of this episode is What Happened? So, What happened?
Whew. What a game that was, right? Roller coaster up and down. And Wes, honestly, when South Carolina went up, this is how much of a roller coaster I think it was. When they went up 10, you felt good. Looked like they're about to go up 11. They go up 10. Saw some people start to kind of mentally chalk this one up as a win. Somebody around me in the stadium. And funny, I saw a post on the Insiders Forum that references the exact thing, and I'm wondering if the person was near me or if it just happened in multiple locations in Williams-Brice, which is possible. Lady around us said, too early. Too early for that. Fast forward a few minutes, Wes. Florida scores. South Carolina punts the ball to Florida, and you get kind of an ominous feeling of, I don't know if they're going to be able to stop the Gators. And then they, of course, ended up having every opportunity to do so and could not get off the field. So that is the very, very broad level overview. And I know we have to go a lot deeper into the why. There was some good in this game. There was some bad in this game. Honestly, you could have kept about the same level of both of those, and South Carolina still should have won this game. They did not. Florida made a few more plays in this game. Credit them. South Carolina had too many mistakes in order to win it. So a lot more to dive in beyond that, I'd say.
Yeah, I will say this. When I don't know how many people it was. I don't know the number. When the Gator Chomp got busted out by South Carolina fans throughout the stadium, everybody who wasn't doing the Gator Chomp was going, What are you doing?
I'll do that. Yeah.
Far too early to bust out the Gator Chomp. And frankly, and I know it was a good portion of the student section. Maybe y'all are freshmen. Maybe you haven't seen it. You got to know the way this game had played out with both offenses actually going up and down the field. It felt like South Carolina had finally given themselves some distance in the score to then put the game away. But the game was by no means over. Anybody that watched how that game played out, this is a legitimate shootout throughout the game. And it was one of those games, Chris, I feel like when you're watching it from the home team's perspective, like you're watching it, if you're a South Carolina fan, which if you're listening to this, you probably are. If you're watching it from the standpoint of South Carolina media, you feel like, or at least I did, for most of this game, I felt like South Carolina was going to win the game. And now you look back, if you were watching this from a neutral observer standpoint, you would probably be saying these are two very tight. These football teams are very close, and this is a very close football game. I looked up there at one point. not only there, it was after a drive. I don't remember which one. The score was close, and the total yardage. This was like pretty late in the game. The total yardage was within 1 yard. So, this is a game throughout the contest that it could have gone either way. And I do feel like once you finally get to 10, because it had been so back and forth the whole way, you kind of breathe a little bit.
Yep.
But you don't bust out the Gator Chomp. That's not why South Carolina lost the game. The Gamecock fans, as they always do, they showed up. They showed out. It was a great atmosphere. It was a sellout. It was loud. They got up on third downs. They got up on fourth downs. They brought the noise. So it's not in any means South Carolina fans' fault. But when the Gator Chomp went off, I was like, a little bit too early. But all right, let's dive into the game itself because there's a lot to hit on. Travis saying 2 evenly matched teams. Winning team made the plays in crucial moments. Agreed. And the other reason there was really no separation in this game was that there were no turnovers during like the kind of back and forth of the matchup. Like we know there was, look at the box score, there's an interception, there's a late pick, at the end of the game from Rattler. But throughout the actual flow of this game, neither side was turning the ball over. Much to sort of the normal, I would say, identity of these two offenses. Florida was much more like they were kind of the more consistent offense, I felt like, during the game as far as like putting together some drives, staying on the field. Florida got, as the game progressed, Florida forced a couple more punts, but South Carolina was scoring touchdowns. Florida was kicking field goals. So those two things, Carolina punted a few more times, but it evened out by scoring touchdowns instead of field goals. Florida had scoring opportunities on just about every single drive they had. They punted twice. But you're forcing several field goals along the way. But it's just even, man. It's close. I feel like this is why you probably felt comfort if you were a South Carolina fan. And y'all bear with me here. I want to get the box score pulled back up. I had it up earlier. But we talked about this on the radio show, Chris. So it's going to be repeat stuff here if you heard it already, but I think it's a different crowd for the most part. If you said going in, based on what we know about South Carolina so far this year, if you said this offense was getting that sort of supplement from the running game that South Carolina got against Florida, I don't want to say South Carolina is going to beat every team they play when they do that, but for the most part, I go into games thinking if the running game is going and Rattler's doing what we know he can do, which he did, then South Carolina is going to have a good shot to win their games at home.
Yeah.
So if you told me South Carolina had 33 rushes for 152 yards and a touchdown, and that doesn't even include taking out sacks at that point, and then I said, hey, Rattler's going to do what Rattler's done pretty much all year long. 23 of 30, 313 yards, 4 touchdowns. If you told me that, and you told me that Luedecke was Luedecke, Trey Knox continues to find his role, I feel like we've seen that the last 2 games. Knox has really started to become maybe what we thought he was going to be when South Carolina landed him. And then if I said, or you told me, hey, Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, they were okay. They had some plays. They didn't take over the game. And they combined for 99 yards. So Montrell Johnson and Trevor Etienne, they combined for the exact day that Mario Anderson had, like almost literally. 20 carries for 99 yards for them, 20 carries for 98 yards for Mario Anderson. If you had that box score sitting in front of you in the game, you knew the game was in Columbia, I'd have said South Carolina wins all day. Easy. But Florida, to their credit, let's not remove the credit from the Gators either. To their credit, they made more plays down the stretch to win the game than South Carolina did, even though they were the team fighting from behind. They kind of needed about 8 plays during a stretch where South Carolina just needed 1 to get them off the field and to win the game.
Yeah, and I think you can look at all the different stuff that happened. I mean, you look at the one ball that went off Ricky Pearsall's hands lands right in Trey Wilson's hands. Almost like the wasn't the same play because it didn't go for a touchdown, but it was like that Auburn Georgia catch, from years ago. Like guy just catches it in stride.
The
Just a
immaculate
freaky play.
reception back in the day.
Yeah. Then you've got 2 4th downs, and those are the ones that are going to be the toughest to swallow. West is the 2 4th down conversions. One of them, I think you had a 3rd and 5. You got a penalty, and so you've got a 4th and 11. You get everything that you want, barring, if you take out an interception, a fumble, like if the ball gets completed or if the ball gets handed off, you got the play that you would want. And that is the quarterback having to bail from the pocket, having to get rid of the ball quickly, and throwing it to the flat, not to a running back, not to a receiver, but to a tight end, and a very talented tight end, by the way, in Arliss Boardingham. But you get a quick ball to the flat to a tight end, and you don't make the tackle. Where if you do almost anything else, and that's just a 8-yard gain, a 9-yard gain, a 10 3/4 yard gain, you're off the field there, and it's going to be very difficult for the Gators to come back. And then you go to the other 4th down, Wes, where you've got a 4th and 10 from Florida's own 25, and you convert that. Gamecocks did a lot of the things that if you were coming up with the formula to, hey, how could you win this game? They did a lot of those things, kind of similar to Mississippi State. You limit the run game. They really limited it against Mississippi State. They shut it down, 27 yards for Woody Marks. Here, you didn't completely shut it down, but you turned it into a throw game. You made Graham Mertz beat you. And I think you made a great point on the radio earlier, Wes. You're banking on Graham Mertz not coming through time and time again when you do that. To his credit, he did. South Carolina helped him at times, right, by leaving guys open. He made some great throws. You had some good fortune on some throws. You missed some tackles on some throws. So kind of a lot of those different things stacked up. But you slowed the run game down. You made it into a throw game. You put them in some difficult situations. And they just continued coming through, Yeah, there's a lot of different directions we could continue to take this because there's so much to unpack. But I think it kind of did remind me of the Mississippi State game from that standpoint. Difference in that one is, South Carolina, they did have the 1 turnover late in the game, ended the game, kind of officially killed off their chances. But you turned it into a throw game like you wanted to. They just made too many plays, and they gave them too many opportunities to score overall, Wes. I mean, you can't run 86 defensive plays. You can't give them, what did you say, 9 scoring opportunities. That's simply too many. And while you did do a good job against the run, 4 of 15, I think it was, on 3rd down defense, that's another area you really wanted to improve. The flip side, 3 of 4 on 4th down. 3 of those conversions came on the 2 drives in the 4th quarter that ended up putting Florida ahead.
Yeah, it didn't feel like 4 of 15 on 3rd down either, to be honest. But the numbers are they credit there. But then when you have the chance to get further off the field, you got to do it, right? And then also, man, I think you just hope, I feel like, as a defense, that you can get off the field a little bit earlier in drives. So many of these drives where they're forcing a 4th down, Florida's kicking a field goal as opposed to punting. Now, at credit due, they hit a 54-yarder. Like, they had a very talented kicker. They took well advantage of that. They got their points. And so, that kind of is what it is. But sorry, I'm getting distracted seeing a few questions coming in. We're going to hit on these some of them we have some answers to. Gamecock Chuck asking why Nick was covering their best receiver. Was that our best option? I'll get to that here in a second. But Chris, let's go, because you brought it up. Let's go back to the missed tackle. And in this case, we're talking about, of course, it's fourth down, throw the ball short, throw the ball very short of the sticks. One-on-one situation. Carolina defender misses the tackle. Next Florida guy gets a nice little block to help spring this thing to where there wasn't as much help rallying to the ball in this play as you would like. But the missed tackle in the situation obviously ended up just being a killer for South Carolina. I think the reason why that one's probably so frustrating for fans and for coaches is the fact you had so much ground there to still give. And so I understand if it's 4th and 3 and you're the last line of defense before a first down, I'm okay with my guy kind of flying in there a little bit out of control and saying, I got to get to the spot. And I'm either going to blow him up or he's going to make me miss and get the first down. But I've at least given myself a chance to make the stop. The difficult part of that, about swallowing that play, is that you kind of lose your situational football there. You're still playing the sticks, even when the sticks are at this point 10 yards behind you. So I thought he lost leverage. You had the sideline as an additional defender. You got to just kind of break down.
Yeah.
And be under control in that play. And I understand these things happen like in milliseconds. Crowd is going nuts. You're saying, I'm going to go make a play. I'm going to go make a play. I'm going to go make a play. So I get it. But it's just that play is going to be circled over and over and over because you had a chance to get off the field. And you kind of it felt like the emotions took over as opposed to just the technique of, hey, I got to know my down and distance. I got to know my situation. There's not 3 defenders around here to help me if I try to blow this thing up and miss. Your job at that point is to break down, slow him down, do everything you can. Use the sideline as another defender, kind of leverage it that direction, and then either get him to the ground or give your guys time to get to you. So I think that's why that one burns so bad. Because nobody wants to watch their team give up a 4th and long when the ball is completed that far from the sticks.
Yeah, you got what you wanted there. I mean, imagine if that was your play, right? And Boardingham gets forced out of bounds or tackled after 5 yards or 6. The Gators fans are probably ticked. Reverse that if you're South Carolina. Really, that's what the game on the line. We got pressured and we threw a ball to our tight end in the flat, right? It's a different story though because you missed the tackle, and now it's just a great individual play. Hey, making plays when it counts. So I didn't have a problem with the defensive call there. I think you got what you wanted. Again, you've got a quarterback throwing it faster than he wants on 4th down, 4th and 11. Throwing it short of the sticks in the flat to a tight end, and you've got a guy there, and all you have to do is make that play. Now, Wes, this is one of those, and I'm going to sound like a football coach in the locker room or something. They didn't lose the game because of that play, right? They played 86 plays of defense in this game, and there were a whole bunch of them that weren't good, right? You had some funky things happen. You had, even though they didn't run the ball very well, you had some runs that popped out. You had some missed opportunities to get more pressure or a sack. You had some guys running open down the field. You had some nice one-on-one efforts by Florida. You had a lot of different things. But just in that situation, that is an example, and probably the best example in this game, of when the game's on a line, you've got to make that play there, right? And I think it's a different type of play than, Trey Wilson catching a ball off a bobble and just, here it is, gift. It's a different play than Ricky Pearsall's game-winning touchdown, where you're in man coverage and you run a really nice route and you beat your guy and the quarterback has a little time and makes a great throw. Different type of play than that, because here, you got kind of exactly what you wanted and didn't come through. So, yeah, that one will be talked about a lot for sure. But, man, it is one and maybe the most notable in a lot of different opportunities that South Carolina had. And, again, this is one of those games, I think, Wes, you put this one a lot more on the defense than the offense. I mean, so South Carolina scored 39 points, right? They scored 37 against Mississippi State. Your past two games, you scored 37 and 39 at home.
Yeah.
I think most people would sign up for that. Then you consider they're missing 4 starting offensive linemen after Vershawn Lee went out. They don't have Juice Wells. There's not much of a running game, right? Like, you're getting what you need offensively. We can nitpick. They needed more out of their final drive that they had to punt on. You get a first down or two late in that game, we might not be talking about Ricky Pearsall. Might not be talking about a 4th down conversion again. We might not be talking about Ricky Pearsall's game-winning touchdown. But the offense, in my book, did more of what it needed to where it should not have come down to a couple 4th down conversions. It should not have come down to them needing to ice the game by getting a couple first downs. They weren't perfect on special teams. I just think defensively, if you're kind of picking the phases of the game, that's the area where you had, I think, the most alarm and concern coming out of the game.
Yeah, for sure, man. I mean, like you said, offense was not perfect, but no offense is. And then for the reasons you mentioned, this was about literally, if you told me, and let's say 37 points, just for you take away the tack on 2-point conversion at the end, 37 points with what this group has dealt with against another SEC defense. Like, I don't think Florida is some loaded SEC defense, like top elite, but I don't think they're scrubs either, man. Like, this is a defense that at times has looked like they have talent. If you'd have told me coming in, hey, South Carolina put up 37 really non-fluke points. This was not pick six. This was not, you got 3 turnovers from short field position. That, to me, that matters. Like, you can look at the final points all you want, but really, how did you score those points? This was, for the most part, the offense driving down the field, running it and throwing it, and then Rattler just being Rattler on some of these plays, man. I didn't realize till I realized it, but I had kind of forgotten until I've been trying to go back over the game today. He made a lot of great decisions on extending plays, knowing when to tuck it and run to get first downs or to get positive yardage. I mean, this dude is playing at a super, super high level, and you just hate that another great start got wasted, by losing the game. But I think, yes, Beamer talked about this. Every offensive staff, every coaching staff practices the 4-minute offense. You want to finish. The name of the game is to finish the game with the ball in your hands. Like, you want to be able to just run out the clock. However, your opponent knows you're going to be skewed towards running the ball and keeping the clock moving. Your opponent at this point has an entire game's worth of film of what you've been doing. And I mean, we see it all the time, is that last first down, that's like the put away first down. It's kind of like in baseball when you're the last 3 outs are the toughest, because you're going to get absolute focus from your opponent. The last first down for an offense is the absolute hardest to get, because the defense is just going to sell out against the run and be uber aggressive. So, yeah, you wanted that. Would that have helped them win the game? Of course. But I think the frustrating part, man, like you talked about, the Dial missed tackle. That one play did not lose the game, but you can circle like 10 plays late in the game, and you can say if South Carolina would have just made one of them, like they didn't have to make all of them.
Yeah, just one.
Just one of them. Then we're having a completely different conversation about where things are right now. And you can't do the what if game because you can what if any football game. So it's not a moral victory by any means, but it just goes to show you the difference, the margin here, Chris, between winning and losing. When you're talking SEC, you're talking two close football teams, and there are no turnovers to really skew it one way or the other.
Yeah. To go back to your point as well, Wes, on South Carolina's scoring drives, right? 75 yards, 75 yards, 75 yards. That was their 3 touchdowns in the first half, all 75-yard drives. That a 66-yard field goal drive, a 72-yard touchdown drive, a 69-yard touchdown drive. Right, so they're earning those touchdowns, not coming on short fields. This team's not had great field position for most of the year. The one kind of nitpick you could say, Wes, is that when they were punting the ball, so their first punt, 5 plays, 2 yards. Now they end up getting actually a really good punt that was bombed, and Georgia went 82 yards and scored, right? But their next punt, 5 yards, 5 plays, 6 yards. 3 plays, 4 yards on another punt. 4 plays, 20 yards. So you pointed this out earlier. On some of the drives, another close thing, in a game like this, field position matters. So they were a little bit feast or famine. They're either scoring on lengthy drives and looking very impressive, or they're punting the football, and instead of having a 6-8 play drive, they're not getting much real estate. On the other side, defensively, South Carolina, allowed way too many scoring opportunities for Florida, but you're getting yourself in a tough position there because, you're letting them drive down the field. So you're keeping your defense on the field it ended up being 86 plays throughout the course of the game. It's way too many. And if you give a football team that has talent that many chances, as Shane Beamer pointed out, Saturday night, Sunday night, and you're asking your guys to play that man coverage that much, they're going to make some plays. And so I think that is let's go back to problem symptom, Wes. Yeah, as Beamer pointed out, yes. Hey, how about all the plays in the nickel, safety, corners, etc.? How about they did make a bunch of plays in man coverage? Sure, they made some in the game, but they also lost out on some, and you're going to give up some, including some big ones, when you're playing that many snaps. So what is the actual problem? Well, you're playing 86 snaps. You've got to get off the field some. You can't give them that many chances over and over. And Wes, man, I'm just sitting here going through the game summary actually on ESPN, and these. I mean, I can't imagine how nauseating this was for the staff and players to watch back. I mean, the 4th and 10, again, from the 25, when Florida's down 3, Mertz has to bail the pocket, and he throws, basically, he's just throwing the ball down the field to Pearsall, who's in man, he's in man coverage, comes back to the ball, makes a contested catch. You go back to that other 4th down. He has to bail the pocket, make a throw, one-on-one, you miss a tackle. This is a tough one, man. The more I go back and look at it and study it, the tougher. I think this is one of the tougher ones to swallow for Gamecock fans, probably that I've seen in a while.
Yeah, the other thing that has stood out to me, Chris, also, again, credit where it is due, is the game that Mertz played.
Yes.
It's very easy to look at this from a South Carolina perspective and say, secondary this, secondary that, defense it. Mertz Mertz avoided some of those where we look at it and say, hey, you had a free rusher or you had a guy there to make a tackle. I mean, credit to those guys. Like, that's the best I've ever seen Graham Mertz play. And you can say, well, South Carolina defense let him play that way. Some of these are just big boy plays, honestly, frankly. Like, rewatching it, he did a phenomenal job of navigating the pocket, stepping up. Carolina got to him a few times, of course, but other times, he's not a runner, but he's nimble enough and seems to have improved a ton since the early part of his career at just kind of feeling the pressure around him and knowing when to step up into the pocket and just get forward. He made a couple of throws at other points of the game where he's moving up into the pocket and throwing the ball without his feet set. And, we maybe have underestimated his ability because, like I said earlier, like you mentioned here in this show, when you say make this guy beat you, you're really saying, I don't think he can do it. And in this case, literally with the game on the line, he went out there and did it. So Florida, I haven't been to their message boards. They're probably sitting there saying, dang, Graham Mertz, what a heck of a comeback victory. This guy led us out of the depths to go win. Yeah. So, we'll try to look at both sides. I think the frustration for South Carolina fans is just kind of seeing the secondary, the numbers the secondary has given up, not just this one game, but fairly consistently when they face quarterbacks and receivers who are good. And, so I think that's the frustration right now from South Carolina fans. Let's see. We got a lot more to get to, man, but let's try to break this thing up. And want to tell everybody out there about our buddy Trey and how they can follow him on all the socials at Trey Helps.
Yeah, at Trey Helps on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok. And if you have not heard us talk about Trey, that is our friend Trey Harrell, recently voted the best personal injury attorney by the readers of the Post and Courier. So great honor for Trey, even greater honor for his past and future clients because they know they're getting outstanding representation. Trey Harrell is an auto accident attorney right here in the great state of South Carolina. Great guy, very helpful guy. And if you follow him on Instagram, Twitter, and TikTok at Trey Helps, going to give you some interesting legal tips and just some interesting things about the auto accident industry, really. Insurance companies, all that good stuff. Trey Harrell helps folks injured in auto accidents all over Gamecock country, all over the state of South Carolina. So obviously we hope that you are never injured in an auto accident or anybody that you know. But if you are, if you know somebody who has been, make sure you don't go at it alone. Find you an attorney who's going to fight for you, who's going to fight to get what you deserved. Find you an attorney who helps. Remember that Trey Helps. That's Trey Helps on Instagram, Twitter, or TikTok, or visit his website, attorneyharrell.com. Appreciate Trey Harrell helping us bring you GC Live a couple times a week.
All right, man, let's continue this conversation. Let's stay with defense for a little bit longer, I guess. Is the pass rush getting a pass as far as I'm not saying they should be. I'm saying is the collective Gamecock Nation putting a little too much on the DBs and not talking as much as maybe it should be about the other half? Like, rushing cover is a thing. Yeah. They're always married together. And, we as a collective cannot sit there, and I'm guilty too. When I see defensive backs playing off against Georgia and, well, why you got this cushion? You can't sit there and say as a group and agree, oh man, way too passive on defense. Why don't they send more pressure? Why aren't they blitzing? We even, and not to pick on somebody in the comments earlier today said, you can't send pressure when you know they're throwing the ball. I think it's the exact opposite. If you know they're throwing, you better be getting some type of pressure there. But to me, we saw South Carolina try to be a little more aggressive defensive. Like, it felt like they were sending guys all game long. Like, they were sending them for all angles. And at times it got picked up. Other times Mertz got out of there. Other times they got there. Other times you have a free rush and you miss. But if we're going to be aggressive and send pressure as a defense, you have to get there because you are putting your guys on islands. So you're gonna have these busts from time to time, or they really weren't even busts. That's the absolute wrong word. You're gonna get beat just one-on-one. Just that's football. Sometimes the receiver wins, sometimes the DB wins. If you're in one-on-one, mano a mano, both sides are gonna win from time to time. So when you're being aggressive, which we all say we won't, myself included, we all want you to send pressure. But if you do, you got to get there. No?
Yeah. No, you're right. And I think it's kind of like the psychological disposition that we have. Maybe a predisposition might be the right word to offense, right? You were talking about this earlier today and how maybe the Gamecock defense in the court of public opinion has at times over the past 2 years, 2.5 years now, gotten a pass because people were so hyper-focused on the offense, so hyper-focused on getting shut out offensively or just underperforming offensively. And man, it seems like we've got these weapons. Why are we not better on offense? And you just kind of shut out the defense a little bit. Like, people talked about it, but if you were to go commission a study on, like, pull social media posts, pull posts from the Insiders Forum, talk to people, when you came out of a game that was a South Carolina loss, it was more often than not talk about the offense, right? The offensive line, running the ball, play calling, et cetera, et cetera. You heard that a lot more. And I think it's kind of similar, Wes, when we're talking about pressure up front, right? It just, when you see a ball go in the air and you see somebody catch ball and there's either a defender not around or there is a defender around, but not close enough to make a play, you're going to say, oh, well, that guy got beat. Well, what happened up front? And I think we can answer this in part by, let's go back to what Shane Beamer said on Sunday during his teleconference. You know, he clarified some comments that he made after the game. It is evident that he at least is of the opinion, going back and watching the film from the game. Again, Saturday, he hasn't studied the film, right? He's going in there pretty much right after the game. Yes, he's noted some things. Yes, he watched the game live, but gone back and watched the film. Sunday teleconference, 6:15 p.m. every week. They have watched the game back multiple times. And he was of the opinion that sometimes they were not getting home with their pressures. So when they're pressuring, they're also playing man coverage a lot of the time. And we can have, deeper conversations about scheme and all those different things, but it's 100% had an effect. I mean, I think there's a lot of different ways you can take this conversation. It can be personnel. Hey, should South Carolina try something different at nickel? We've already seen them do that multiple times this year. Should they be calling different, more zone, for instance? Should they be doing that? Well, maybe so. I mean, I think it's a fair conversation to have. Graham Mertz did do a pretty good job under pressure. Looking at some numbers here, Wes. So this is PFF. When he was not blitzed, he completed 68% of his passes for 207 yards and a touchdown. When he was blitzed, it went down 55.6, 15 of 27. But then he threw 2 touchdowns, no picks. Trying to see when he was under pressure for just 11 attempts, and he was kept clean 38 attempts, according to PFF. So let's take
that doesn't match my memory, but I mean,
it doesn't match mine either. So what is kept, do they count under pressure when he kind of bails the pocket like somewhat early? I don't know. Let's say it's a little bit more than that. I think we can agree. Not under pressure enough. Especially when you're blitzing a pretty good amount. Like, according to these numbers, he was blitzed 27 times and not blitzed 22. So if you're South Carolina, you've blitzed more than you have not, right?
Yes.
According to this. And I think that would match our eyes. Like I recall a lot of blitzes too. So you're blitzing over 50% of the time, but you're not getting meaningful pressure 50% of the time. You want those numbers to be more even.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of like, how we go to like recruiting camps and it's 1-on-1, and then the defender, the edge guy, kind of wins the rep, but doesn't really win the rep. And then the offensive lineman says, "Oh, I got him," and the edge guy's like, "No, I got there." It felt like time after time. Like it wasn't that the rush was getting stonewalled or anything. It was like they were just barely not getting there. Even when South Carolina was rushing 4. It's like you could see the edge pressure about to get there, and then he gets the ball out just in time. So it's kind of one of those like game of milliseconds type thing where if you're on the good side of that, you're saying, "Oh, I pressured him all night." If you're on the bad side of that, and different quarterbacks handle that different ways. Some quarterbacks just feel the pocket about to cave in, and it affects them. To Mertz's credit, I thought there were a lot of times where the pocket was about to cave in, and he got the ball out and gave them a chance. I mean, the very first sequence of Florida's drive that ended up being the game-winning drive, South Carolina has 3 great reps. And, 3 great reps. There's pressure, there's coverage, everybody does their job. You're sitting there, there's 2 minutes and 21 seconds or so left. And you're saying one more play, and everybody's going to the locker room to celebrate. And then you get beat down the field on a 1-on-1 jump ball, for a first down. And so you can pick like 10 plays that match that very thing. But the beauty and the difficulty of football is that it's really, truly never any one thing. It's always some huge combination of all the things we're talking about.
I got asked today, Wes, to that point. When you look at the defense, and it's a fair question, and I'm almost frustrated that I can't answer it, but I don't feel like I can. What is the main problem is what I was asked, right? Because, and we want to find solutions thing. It's another, I feel like we're doing psychoanalysis on the show. Like we want to find the one thing. What is the problem? And I think we try to simplify a game that's incredibly complex. You got 22 people in the field doing all different things, all trying to fight each other, on every single play. So it's a complex game. I don't like when coaches say football is a very simple game. No, it's not. It's not simple at all. A lot of things have to go right. 55 things can go right on one play. One can go wrong and you lose, I got asked, what's the main problem with the defense? Is it coaching? Is it scheme? Is it talent? And it's like, man, that's hard to answer. You can point to different things, even within that one game against Florida, and you could probably point to every single one of them in certain instances. Ultimately, given, Wes, that this is a results-based business, if at some indeterminate point that we don't really know, maybe the end of this season, maybe next season, whatever, if the results are not good enough, the overall body of work, sometimes that necessitates change, right? Even if it is a variety of factors, and it often is, ultimately there has to be, a responsible party, so to speak. But it's not as easy to say. We can't just say, it's just the scheme they ran, right? Because some of the personnel things that we have talked about all year, going into the season, during the season, they were an issue on Saturday. Some of the depth issues we talk about, they were an issue. Some of the injury issues were an issue. We can talk about coaching or scheme or what you're asking your guys to do. Should you be asking them to do that? So incredibly complex game, and it's kind of difficult to just narrow it down to just say it's just this. That's kind of a social media like hot takey thing. It's just this. Again, ultimately the coaches are responsible for it, but man, we've just seen so much from this defense that needs to get corrected and cleaned up, and I think it's in all areas.
Unfortunately, in some cases, I think, and this is not to say guys can't get better. This is not to say they're not capable, and this is not to throw anybody under the bus. It's just a totality of the thing. You remember what Dow Loggins said about some spots on offense. I think right now Carolina has had some areas where they've been just good enough to get beat. It's not that you're just getting whipped, like you're just getting beat at the point of attack. It's not that you don't belong on the field. Like all these guys that are playing right now are SEC football players. But when they're facing elite talent at times or above average SEC talent at times, you're just getting beat in that one-on-one situation. And it's just a few too many times right now, I think, for the defense. Like, in a weird way, they're like not that far off, but in a weird way, they're consistently just far enough off to make enough plays, if that makes any sense at all.
Well, it does. I mean, go back to your 3 great plays in a row.
Yeah. These aren't busts, Chris. These are not just
3 great plays in a row, and the 4th you played well. You just got beat one-on-one. And again, margin for error, you don't have enough. Like there may be a game this season, Wes, where you have a similar type of game. And can South Carolina be the one to make one more play to where you have the same game? You could play the same game and one team makes one more play and they were on the wrong side of it. And that is one issue. You want to be a team. It's all about like expanding your margins, I guess. I couldn't come up with the word, couldn't spit it out. Like you want to have more wiggle room. South Carolina doesn't right now. And so that's why every single play, every sequence is kind of like hyper intense with how we dive into it.
Well, and you know what? I think, man, I'm not gonna sit here and say, hey, this defender played great and just, I'm not gonna lie about it. But at the same time, people wanna pick on Nick E right now. The 4th and 10, I mean, he's in one-on-one coverage with a blitz in front of him. He stays with his guy stride for stride. Like this, I'm looking at it right now. I would put it on the screen, but we'll get a copyright notice. He's there. Now, you want him to be able to make a little bit, like a slightly little bit better timing on making a play on the ball, the final step, getting in there or getting his hands. Even once Pearsall has his hands on the ball, you want to get your hand or arm up in between, his hands. But for a guy who really was a true safety last year, playing in one-on-one coverage against their best receiver, it's not like he just got beat, like, by 3 steps. He's right there. And it's just that little tiny distance between a winning play and a not winning play in this situation. And then Florida makes the play. They reset their downs. So then they relax a little bit and kind of keep it going. So I know how frustrated the fans are. I know how frustrated it can be to watch. Frustrating it can be to watch. I can only imagine how frustrating it is for the kids themselves, and for the coaches. So I think we all got to be careful, man. Like, we can talk about the game, we can talk about the issues, Nobody's going to sit here and say, oh, that was a great play if it wasn't. But, these guys are trying their absolute tails off as well. And he's right there on the guy. Just didn't quite finish the play. There's a lot of plays on here, man, that just were not quite finished. I think is a good way to say it. What did you make of the issue on the PAT? Because I had somebody in front of me say, like, the PAT, the miss there, was it a bad snap or bad hold?
Honestly, I have not gotten a good enough second look at it to say one way or the other, and
Okay,
didn't really have a great sense live.
We won't put it on anybody there specifically because we don't know. But guy in front of me says, that's the difference in the game. That cost us the game. And I started trying to do the butterfly effect thing and so that Trey says bad snap. That was either everything in terms of sort of affecting the game, and yet another example of there's one play that kind of cost you, or it was nothing. Because if Florida responds and hits their 2-point conversion, then it's nothing. It's the exact same, basically. I'm saying if you have good snap, good hold, good kick, you're up by 11. They go down. They get a 2. Now it's a 3-point game, and it's the exact same situation. However, you start playing this thing out, South Carolina would then have been up 38-27. Let's say Florida goes down. They score their touchdown. They go for 2. They don't get it. Now you're up 38-33. So then when Florida scores their next touchdown, you're now in a position to kick a field goal. We know South Carolina got the ball back without being in a spot to kick a field goal. Well, Florida then, they would have been up after their touchdown 38-39. And they would have gone for 2 again to chase the points. And if they got it, you'd be kicking a field goal to tie. If they missed it, you'd be kicking a field goal to win, which becomes obviously a completely different scenario for your offense, knowing you need 3 versus knowing you need, a touchdown. So that missed opportunity, either depending on what would have happened next, we'll never know, either meant absolutely nothing or it meant a ton. Just like Florida being able to get a 2-point conversion because you had an offsides on a PAT. That's a forgotten play in all this.
Yep.
Florida kicks the PAT early in the game. It's completely okay with not chasing the points at that point in the game. And then what happens? You have a offsides. They say, you know what? We're half the distance now. We're going to go for it. And they go ahead and get the 2.
Yep. I agree with both of those points, Wes, for sure. I have no disagreements. I just cannot take my mind off of take everything else out and just play the game out just like it was played out. Get off the field on one of those 4th downs where you were in position. I mean, that's the bottom line to me. And I think we can go back to either of those plays that you mentioned, especially I think the snap, right? That one could have ended up playing into it even more. But just as it is, the 2 4th downs, those are hard to swallow. Those are really, really hard to swallow. Heck, I think what would have happened if Eugene Wilson III, Trey Wilson didn't catch the other ball? That was on a 1st down. I think that ended up being a 22-yard gain. Maybe they're in 2nd and 10 there. Maybe Graham Mertz fumbles. Maybe he throws a pick. Maybe they get to 4th down again and South Carolina finally gets a stop, right? You just never know. I tend to put it a little bit more on those offensive sequences where you don't get off the field in those critical situations.
Yeah, I mean, when that ball goes in the air, I'm instantly thinking pick. When a ball flies up like that,
Yep.
We've all watched enough football to know there's no rhyme or reason to where the thing's landing, you know?
Well, and there was one that was not that close. I feel like there's one that got batted and DQ Smith ended up being a yard or two around it, and he dove kind of late. It's not like it went off his hands, right? It wasn't that close of a play. But even you just look at a play like that. Like, what if they could have gotten that pick, right? And he had some room to run. I mean, just a couple weird things that happen, a couple uncharacteristic things that happen, and then unfortunately some characteristic things that happen, right? Just having some balls that you get beat on, and we've seen that a few times this season. We've seen it in some difficult spots for South Carolina.
For sure, man. We're getting close to the end, but I do want to talk about Jalewis Solomon. I do want to talk about one other thing from the game as well. And then, of course, we'll move on as the week goes on. But first, going to tell you about our friends at Liberty Tax. Give them a call now, 803-462-5576. If it may not be tax time right now, but maybe you've had some life changes. Maybe you own a small business. Maybe you got a side gig and you want to know how all that works. It can be complicated. Everybody, if you have a side gig and you have a 1099, you're supposed to do prepaid taxes and all this other stuff. You're going to want somebody who can help walk you through the process. And Larry and his team at Liberty Tax can do just that. Do what Chris did and call them, 803-462-5576. Shout out to Larry for always taking care of us here on GC Live. I am a little bit surprised, again, not picking on anybody, but I'm a little surprised on the Marcellus Dial shade from our comments because not our comments, but from comment section. Sell has not had a bad year by any means. Matter of fact, he's probably one of South Carolina's higher graded players on defense.
I think he was the only guy that Ricky Pearsall didn't get a catch against, honestly, Wes. I think some of that was scheme, right? But he didn't have any targets against Marcellus Dial. They probably kind of avoided Dial with where they were putting him. But that also, I think, says something about Marcellus because Ricky Pearsall is their number one receiver.
Yeah, Sell in, we'll lean on PFF again. In six games. He's given up, he's been targeted 29 times and has allowed just 17 catches for 239 yards, and he graded out as a 69.7, which is 60 is kind of like average. Like you didn't do anything good, you didn't do anything bad. So, that's not an elite grade necessarily, but that's not a bad grade whatsoever, especially considering some of the other issues that you've seen on, on defense. I guess there's more to get to in the game, man, but we need to hit some recruiting. Jalewis Solomon making his, I think you can fairly say, anticipated commitment to South Carolina on Sunday. We didn't necessarily know when he decommitted from Auburn when the following commitment might be, but the Gamecocks get a big one, dude. I mean, we talked about him in the summer when we thought he was going to be in the class. This is a guy you need, and this is a guy, I think, frankly, you look at some of these issues in the secondary, he's going to at least have an opportunity, if he takes advantage of it, to come in and play early, I would think.
Yeah, and this is a guy, Wes, we've talked so much about nickel. We got to talk more about nickel this week. Let's do that. Can we have a nickel show on Wednesday, maybe? I think. But Jalewis Solomon, to me, has the skill set to where I don't know for sure that they'll slot him there, but he could, right? You look at his size, his skill set. This is a guy that could play receiver, special teams, a special teams returner, or probably most places in the secondary if you really wanted. And I think when you look at his size and skill set, he kind of fits into being a corner or a nickel type. Physical dude, speedy dude, just a football player. South Georgia, just football player, and really like his skill set. This is a big pickup. And Wes, you look at now at this DB class, right? So we know, and you could say this for almost any spot. You can look at what they have in the recruiting class in the high school ranks, and then you could say they got to hit the transfer portal, right? This is going to be a big portal year, and I think we're going to see that even at DB. But they got Kelvin Hunter now, who's like a safety or nickel type, 4-star guy. You got Braden Lee, who they like as a corner, 4-star guy. And now you look at David Busey, right? Who's probably that, he has safety nickel type, they think he is at South Carolina. Not as highly ranked of a player, but just a really good football player at the high school level. And now you've added Solomon to that. So you're building a nice high school class that I think they'll supplement with the portal, but some guys that, could help early, whether it's on special teams or in the secondary. And Wes, you still got some guys on the roster, I think, that you could develop too, but that's conversation for another day. Jalewis Solomon, big pickup for the Gamecocks.
Yeah, no doubt, man. I just like the versatility, and you throw on his film, he's out there like within the first few plays, he's making a diving catch at wide receiver, making people miss. Later on, he makes if you stick it out and watch the full film from his mid-season senior year thing, making a one-handed grab downfield, like he has ball skills. He has receiver ball skills, honestly. So I like having a guy like that on defense that can go do things that, can kind of put you over the top and give you that edge when the ball's in the air. There's a little bit of, I don't think they're similar players necessarily. Kilgore is bigger, I guess, but I think there's a little bit of similarities to like a Jalen Kilgore or Vakari Swain, just to the fact that these are Georgia boys. They're like kind of do everything for their team. They make an impact on offense. They make an impact on defense. They just have so much to their game. And I think that adds quite a bit of value to you as a prospect when you can say, hey, even if it doesn't work out at one spot, I could maybe help you at another one. And so I think for Solomon, there's a reason this kid had offers from all over the place. Remember Florida State early on was heavily pursuing him, and it looked like it was going to come down to Florida State and South Carolina. Like his whole list for the entire process was like loaded with blue chip programs. So for a lot of reasons, I think this is a big pickup for South Carolina. And I think Emmanwori, DQ Smith, Jalen Kilgore, like that's still a really good group. That's a good core to build off of if you're kind of talking about your safety types. I think the thing you really have to solve is just who's going to be your nickel, which again, we'll talk about that a ton down the road. And then kind of looking past your older players who are currently on campus at corner, who's going to be your number one? Like who's going to be that lockdown cornerback that can go out there and be a pure cover guy if you're going to keep playing man coverage. If you don't have that guy, you don't have those guys, you do probably have to think more along the lines of being a little bit more of a zone cover team, I think.
Yeah, and there's some guys, and Travis making a good point about DB. I mean, you've got some young guys that are continuing to develop. I think we think of Nick Emmanwori and DQ Smith, kind of lump them into like, oh, they played 40 games here. They haven't, and there's some things to figure out from a personnel and a usage standpoint. Yeah, that's fair. But you've got some guys on the roster that haven't factored in that could. Again, let's caution. Let's point to Xavier Legette, right? And there's not a lot of Xavier Legettes on the roster right now, of course, but there are guys even at DB that have talent that have not shown up yet in games that will probably show up in games. And you can't give up on guys when they're sophomores. You certainly can't give up on guys when they're freshmen, right? And they haven't really factored in yet. That is also the case at DB. So a lot more to track there going forward.
No doubt. All right, y'all. We are out of time, but appreciate it. As always, appreciate y'all hanging in there. We'll have Mike Uva's show tomorrow. Then on Wednesday, Chris and I will be back in. And, hey, we're going to hear from Loggins and Clayton White. So both those guys will talk about what they saw from their units this past week and going into Missouri, which tough test, man, really tough test. But we'll see if they can bounce back and do what they've done the last couple of years, and that's win some games that people didn't expect them to. The only difference here, this one on the road, man. So 2 tough road contests. Gamecock's going to have to find a way to try and somehow split these 2, even though, it's going to be a tough hill to climb, I think. But we got plenty more time later on to get to that. That's it for today. For Chris, I'm Wes. We'll see y'all soon.